on this computer. Okay, everyone, please approve of the recording. Now, let's pray together. Lord, we ask that you would help us understand this story and find your truths in it that will help change our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Now, this story takes place when Saul was king in Israel, and Saul was a big man. He was head and shoulders taller than everyone else. And Israel was at war with the Philistines, and the Philistines had a champion who was fighting for them named Goliath. And Goliath was close to 9 feet tall, and he weighed 400 pounds distributed among those 9 feet, or even more than that. And he was well armed. He had all kinds of armament with him. And what he would do is he would go out for every day for 40 days. He would go out in the morning and go out again in the evening. And he would defy Israel and say he defies the people of Israel to come and fight with him. And if they could choose a champion to come and fight with him, if Israel won and killed him, then the Philistines would be slaves to Israel. But if the Philistines killed Israel's champion, then the Israelites would be slaves to the Philistines. And so imagine hearing that back and forth as the two armies are on two separate hills with a valley in between them. Now, David had been anointed by Samuel to be king in Israel, but David was just a young man, and Saul was still alive, and David was the youngest of 7 sons. And David's father, Jesse, had told David, take some grain and take some bread and take some cheese to your brothers and to their captains. Probably so that the captains would have, maybe keep them in the back instead of on the front lines, who knows. And so David went to do that. And now the two armies are facing each other, facing off on each other. And this is where our story starts today, okay? So David rose early in the morning, and he left the sheep with a keeper of the sheep and did as his father Jesse had commanded him. And when David came into the camp, into the army camp, the army was going out to the fight and shouting for the battle. And for Israel and the Philistines had lined up in battle array, army against army. And David left the things he brought with the keeper of the train, of the carriage, of the supplies keeper. And David ran to the army and greeted his brothers. And while he was talking with his brothers, the champion, the Philistine, the giant, Goliath of Gath, came out and spoke what he would normally spoke. And David heard Goliath. And all the men of Israel, when they saw Goliath, the champion, they withdrew from there, and they were very frightened. So the men of Israel said, have you seen the champion, the man who has come up, Goliath? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it will be that the man who kills Goliath, the king will make him very rich. And the king will give his daughter to that man to be married. And that man's family will be free from taxes in Israel. Then David spoke to the men who were with him. And he said, well, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him, this is what will be done to the man that kills the Philistine. Now, Eliab, David's oldest brother, when he heard David speak to the men, Eliab got angry with David. And that is where our story ends today. Interesting story. I really like that story. So I know there's not a lot of us. And so if anyone would like to try to repeat that story as best you can, starting with David, let me see where it starts. David rose early in the morning, took the sheep, gave them to another sheep keeper, and took what his father had told him to go, and went to the camp. Anyone want to try? Okay, Diane, go ahead.
So David got there just as the two armies were lining up together, and the champion, the giant Goliath, came out and gave his challenge to Israel. And David said, and the people were talking about what was going to happen, and there would be a reward for anybody who went out and challenged this guy. He would be given riches, and his family wouldn't have to pay taxes, and he'd be given the king's daughter in marriage. And so David was asking about this. What's gonna, what will happen to this uncircumcised fellow who's talking trash about our God? And then they told David, and his brother, one of his older brothers, heard about this, and he was displeased with David.
Very, very good, Diane. You got the story down really good. The armies lining up and the people talking about the uncircumcised Philistine, and Eliab getting angry at David for bringing it up. So that's a kind of a really good summary of what the story is, Diane. Congratulations to you. Let's go through the story together. Okay. So when did David get up in the morning? Early in the morning. And the first thing he did was take care of the sheep. What did he do with the sheep?
His father Jesse told him to hand them off to another shepherd.
Okay, his father Jesse told him to take something to the children of Israel. You got that right. Okay. David, on his own initiative, handed them over to another shepherd. Okay. And then he did what his father Jesse had said, like Luke said. And when David came to the camp, what was happening at that time? Remember?
Lining up.
The armies were lining up. They were going out. And what were the men doing?
Shouting?
They were
Shouting.
shouting full battle
Shouting
formation.
for battle. Shouting for battle formation. Okay, because Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in battle array, army against army. And David left his supplies with
Somebody, right?
the baggage keeper. Okay, the baggage keeper. And then he
Ran over to the
army and greeted his brothers. And while he was talking with his brothers, who came out?
Goliath,
the champion, the Philistine, Goliath from Gath, from the armies of the Philistines. Very good, yes. And he said what he had normally said. And when the men of Israel heard this, they said, I'll take him on.
No.
Yeah, right.
Somebody ought to do that.
They withdrew and they got very frightened. And the men of Israel, that's right, the men of Israel said, have you seen the man, Goliath, the champion, who has come to us? Surely he has come to defy Israel. And what's going to happen to the man that kills Goliath?
He'll get money.
It'll be money.
He'll become exceedingly rich.
And
He'll get married to the king's daughter.
He'll get
He'll get married to the king's daughter. And one more thing that Diane smiled about.
Oh, Flora smiled about it too. No taxes.
Okay. No tax. Who wants no taxes in your life? Okay. I would be very happy with that too. Then David spoke to the man who stood by him, and he asked, what question did he ask?
About circumcision?
No, he asked the same question. What's going to happen to the man who kills this uncircumcised Philistine and takes the reproach away from Israel? That he should defy the armies of the living God. And so the people said this and this will happen to him. And then Eliab came out, David's older brother. And what did Eliab do?
he's angry at David.
He got mad at David. Yeah, he got mad when he heard David talking trash. So that's interesting. Just for a size comparison, how many know anything about American basketball in the NBA? Okay, Shaquille O'Neal is 7'2" and weighs about 350 pounds. And he was about 1.5 to 2 feet smaller than Goliath, and maybe 150 pounds smaller. So just that you have some kind of size comparison to how tall Goliath was compared to Shaq. So here's this giant, this big man, taller than Shaq, coming out 80 times for 40 days, morning and evening, issuing a challenge. How do you think the king, who was head and shoulders above everyone else, how do you think his officers and his men that were with him might have been feeling about what was going on?
Well, it's not really fair that they've got a freakish guy. We got a perfectly decent army, but it's not our fault they have a freak on their side.
Yeah, they might have been thinking that. It's unfair. Yeah, we should go toe to
morale was
toe.
completely demoralized.
Oh my goodness, yes. Who do you think should have taken up that challenge the first day?
Oh, right.
Who? What was that, Flora?
Saul should take the
Saul, the
challenge.
king. Yeah, he probably should have taken up.
Guy, yeah.
Yeah, if he's God's anointed, he should go out there. So, all right, well, let's look at this story. So David rose early in the morning and left the sheep with another keeper. And he took the things that his father had told him to take, Jesse, and he came to the camp just as the army was going out into battle array. For the Philistines, and Israel and the Philistines had drawn up army against army, and David left his supplies with the keeper of the baggage. So it's kind of interesting that David got up very early in the morning to do what his father had said. So what might we learn about David that he would get up early in the morning to do this?
Obedient.
Obedient. I like that. He was obedient. Was he responsible, you think, too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Obedient, responsible boy.
Well,
Could
I mean,
David-
it may just be sensible. I'm going to assume that if he's not super close, he's not going to be there when Goliath comes out in the morning. So perhaps he's been traveling all day, and it's the evening time when Goliath comes out.
Oh, okay. Well, that may be. We don't know for sure the time frame. We do know David got up early in the morning, and we don't know how close he was to the battlefield. That's true.
I mean, or if
is
it was
it-
more than one day. It sounds
Right.
like he just goes.
Yeah. When I first read it, I thought he might have just, gotten up very early and gotten there. He might have been fairly close. But now that I'm thinking about it, he may have made it in the evening for the evening challenge. You just never know. What do y'all think?
Especially because he had to run.
He did run when he dropped his stuff off. That's true. Okay. So could David have done something different besides get up early in the morning?
He can take his time, right?
He could have taken his time to do it. Yeah. Is a battlefield a safe place for young people?
No way.
Really not an age.
Well, Luke is a veteran. He served during the terror wars, didn't you, Luke? So we appreciate
I
that.
didn't go to war though.
You didn't go to war, but you served during the terror wars. So thank you for that. So David left his sheep with a keeper of the sheep. So what else might we learn about David? He gets up early in the morning. He's obedient to his dad. He takes care of the sheep first. What else might we learn about him from that?
Well, I just feel like we're learning more about Jesse.
Explain that to me, please, Diane. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Jesse could have said, I'm going to keep back one of my sons in case something happens that protects more of my sons from the warfare. And he could just as easily have sent a servant to deliver these things. Hopefully he would have a servant who was sufficiently reliable. But maybe he just wanted the boy to have this experience, or just thought, this kid will will give me a better, maybe he figures he'll give him a better report of the sons or something, but it seems to say more about Jesse.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was looking at that too, and I noticed that if David leaves the sheep with someone, is obedient to his father, and takes what his father said, which was, some bread and some toasted grain and some cheese, that does tell us quite a bit about Jesse, David's father. So what else might we learn about Jesse? Sending one of his sons with a gift to the commanders and to his sons.
It's a good judge of character.
Explain that, Luke.
I mean, like how we were thinking David, he's responsible. I mean, he obviously trusted him, and with very, important things.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he just had good discernment, with his sons, and he knew a leader or an up and coming leader when he saw one.
So when David, thank you, Luke. So when David gets to the battlefield, he takes what he had, the loaves of bread for his brothers, the toasted grain for his brothers, and the cheese for the brothers' officers. I find very interesting. And he takes that and gives that to the commander of the baggage train. So what more does that tell us about David, that he took the time to do that?
That could imply that, of course, respect, but that could imply that they understand a chain of command and a political hierarchy within the military.
That's really interesting. What do you mean the political hierarchy?
Keeping
the officers happy, maybe keeping your sons back out of the front lines, huh?
There could have been a lot of stuff at play there. And also just, then David comes and speaks. I guess it kind of could have showed that you recognize and respect their position, but you're still going to end up saying what you need to say. I don't know. I guess it could have, without showing that respect, they could have ended up getting really offended because, it could have looked like David was just completely taking over the leadership role.
Okay, well, we're going to look at what David said in a little bit. Right now, I think it's just interesting that the dad sent cheeses to the commanders, to his sons' commanders, sent bread and toasted grain to his sons, fresh baked bread. And that David, when he got to the battle site, the first thing he did was take the bread and the cheese and give it to the commander to the commander of the baggage train. What do you think, David? What does that show us about David?
Obedient, right? He knows that.
Obedient,
that things is going to give to the commander.
Okay.
So
And
first, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think David was being responsible with things? Could he have just left them there on the ground? No. Yeah. Probably disappear the bread and the grains and the cheeses. Sounds almost like pizza. Just need some good sauce there. So David just.
Oh no! I guess like how you said that. How he didn't leave it on the ground. Like he's the type that's going to see a task through with his own hands, or it implies.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, he personally got the keeper of the sheep. He just didn't say you keep. He personally got him to keep the sheep, and here he's personally taking care of the what he's going to give to the officers and to his brothers. It's kind of interesting. He followed it through all the way, Luke.
I think he also knows how much flack is in it for him if he messes with the food for his older brothers. There will be no end of remembrance of that event should the food for his brothers not be properly placed in their care.
Yes, indeed. Now, Luke, how old are you?
35, just turned
And
35.
Isaac, how old are you?
I'll be 30 in 2 weeks.
Okay, so there's like 31 years between me and Isaac and 26 years between me and Luke. So yeah, I can appreciate that the older brother might cause a little bit of flack for the younger brother if the special gift to my commanding officer is disrupted. That might mean me going to the front lines when I didn't have to. So yeah, that's very interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that. So right as David gets there, the armies are coming out, and David runs to the army and to greet his brothers. So, yeah, what may we learn about David from that he ran straight to where his brothers were?
Well, did he? Well, I think, he's a young guy. He's curious
Okay.
what's going on in the military camp. I can't help myself. I must see it immediately. And so I think he's just anxious to see what's going on.
Okay.
Something's going on. He's got to see it.
Okay. Well, Luke, when the military does things, do the common soldiers, they do them pretty quick? Or is, if you're about to do something important, is that a pretty fast thing that happens?
That's funny you say that. Like with the bread and cheese thing, the military would always say, hurry up and wait. I mean, it's situational, of course. Of course, if there's an imminent threat or something, that's one thing. But with stuff like food and stuff, whenever it's not really a serious situation, you're gonna, the lower you are ranking and stuff, the longer you might have to wait. Even the better gear you might even get.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so David's doing the hurry up and wait thing. He drops this thing off. He runs as fast as he can, gets his brother. Now he's got to wait. He's talking to his brothers. And that's when, and it says the champion, the Philistine of Gath named Goliath, comes out and says what he normally has to say. And when the men of Israel hear this, they're frightened. So the men of Israel, when they saw Goliath, they withdrew and were very frightened. And then they said, have you seen the man? Have you seen the man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy the armies of Israel. And it shall be done to the man that kills him, that he will become exceedingly wealthy. The king will give his daughter to that man, and that man will be free from taxes in Israel, which is quite an incentive, I would think. Yeah, and so when they saw this guy, they were immediately frightened, and they withdrew even. So could they have done anything different? What could they have done differently?
Who they?
The people of Israel, the armies of Israel. They came out to form up in battle array. 1, 2, 3, 4, who's gonna win the war? Something like that. They were doing their military shouts. And now they're withdrawing in fear because they see somebody who's tall. So help me learn a little bit about Israel. That impacted them rather severely.
Well, it's like you show up for a choir and you find out they're looking for a soloist. You're like, whoa, I'm not really a soloist kind of person. I'm more of a choir person.
Yeah.
I plan to be, with kind of shoulder to shoulder with some folk and not, out there by myself. That's for somebody else.
That's
So
a very interesting analogy. Yeah, like
that really,
Brian's
yeah,
saying,
that is. I like that too.
they went from, what? I'm sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
No, you go ahead. They went from what?
Oh, yeah, they like Diane's saying, they went from, we're used to fighting in unison with the phalanx, our shields, and all of a sudden we're looking for a single one-on-one duel. We don't have that warrior. That's terrifying.
Yeah. So I mean, this guy's been doing this for 40 days, 80 times. It's like the 80th time he's doing it. Could they have come up with a better plan to take this guy down? Did they have to fight the way the enemy wanted to?
No, who says that's the rule?
Yeah.
When the
I mean,
enemy
you know.
said, come out and fight me, and I'm like, with that, let's just do this.
Yeah, I mean, they knew where he was going to be for 39 days in a row.
Well, I
doing
mean,
the
who
same
cares
thing.
about this guy? We don't want to defeat this guy. Let's just go against this other army.
Yeah, it's
whoop
kind of
the other army.
interesting. Yeah, they didn't come up with a plan to ambush him. They didn't come up, they could have easily done that. They know where he's going to be. They know where he's been there for 39 days, spouting the same
No,
garbage.
not the guy. I'm not saying the guy. Who cares about the guy? Just say, let's go ahead and attack the other army. We'll defeat
Yeah,
the
they
other
could have done that
army.
too. They
We're
could
not
have
gonna
attacked
do
the other army.
stupid, one-on-one challenge. That
So they
benefits
did-
you because you've got, Mr. Basketball Plus. Yeah.
Yeah. So they didn't do that. They didn't just have a regular battle. They submitted to the enemy's plan. So what can we learn about Israel and its command structure that they didn't just forget him and just everybody just charge now? Let's just fight this battle like we're supposed to. What can we learn about Israel's command structure?
I think Saul doesn't
Very
know
little
his
faith,
people.
easily distracted.
Let's let Diane go first, Luke, and then you.
I think Saul doesn't know his people. Saul is just trying to bribe somebody into doing this. And they're looking wealth, death, wealth, death. Never mind. And so it's like he's not inspiring people to do this. He's not looking to approach someone apparently to say, maybe he has done some things, but he's not inspiring the men to want to do anything. He's allowed them to slip into this pattern of nothing, which probably just discourages them more the longer it goes. I don't know. What do they think? The other guys are just going to wander off? Oh, we got bored. So it's poor leadership. It's not a good motivation. You don't motivate very many people to put their life on the line for a cash prize.
Thank you, Diane. Luke,
And
go
we
ahead.
haven't seen his daughter yet.
We haven't seen his daughter.
Yeah. Diane's exactly right. There is no leadership. It's at all. I mean, that's what it says about the leadership. There is none, like she was saying.
So what happens to an army or a group of people when, there's no leadership and there's a serious threat?
You get decimated.
Yeah, wow. So here we see them withdrawing, fleeing perhaps. Wow, that's really interesting. And then the men are talking about it. And like Diane said, they're looking to be bribed. Wow, that's really interesting. I had not thought about that. So this is a big bribe, basically, to, well, let me ask you this question. Do you think the Philistines would have peacefully submitted to being Israel's slaves if someone beat Goliath?
No.
No,
that's one of those situations where that could be so demoralizing. Like, you beat Goliath, then the other army's gonna run because they don't believe he can be beaten.
I think it's interesting. Either this is all of everybody's forces, or they don't want to escalate this. Because one thing you could do would be, well, we feel a little outmatched. Let's send for some more of our people. Because over a period of 40 days, either side could have looked for reinforcements.
Yeah.
But
or some kind of other strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. Or go and beg with one of their allies. Yeah, come and help us. but it seems like it's just this stalemate where there's not a lot of will on either side.
Yeah. So Israel had a big king, a big man. They had an army, but they didn't have the leadership they needed to even plan how to do this for 40 days straight. So, wow. So what do you think Israel's spiritual condition was at this time?
Very weak.
Very weak. Very weak. Yeah. So David's there with his brothers, and apparently there's some, he hears the giant, and there's this gossip going around, and he sees the men are frightened. And so he says, well, he asks, what's this gossip? What's going to be done to the man who kills this uncircumcised Philistine who's defying our armies? And so they tell him, this will be done. So that David would ask that question again, that there's obviously some gossip running around, it seems to me, that David would ask this question, insulting the giant while he does that. He calls him, who will kill this Philistine and take the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? So David asks two questions. He doesn't make statements here, but he asks questions. What might we learn about David? That instead of making statements against the giant, he asks questions about what's going to happen. We'll learn about him from that. He's got several older brothers in the army right now. Could he have done something different besides asking these questions?
I think it's showing some respect instead of coming right in and making some declarations. After all, he's been away and he's the youngest. He's asking a couple of questions. It's perhaps more acceptable to ask a couple of questions, even if they're a tad loaded. Yeah,
you might have gotten to communication school where the CNN people went to communication school. I don't know. So after he asks these questions, the people tell him, this will be done. So the rumor you heard was true. And then Eliab, David's older brother, gets angry at David. So explain that to me. Help me understand that. Diane said the questions were loaded questions. What do y'all think? Might have triggered Eliab.
Could you say the questions again?
Sure. Eliab got angry at David.
No, not your question, but the questions.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Here are the questions. What shall be done to the man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Now, I'm going to agree with Diane. This is a loaded question. These are two loaded questions, but they are questions. Okay, so Eliab gets angry at David. It says, the people say this will be happening. You heard correctly. So Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard what he spoke to the men, and he was angry with David. So what can we learn about Eliab that he would get angry at David? And what can we learn about David that he asked questions instead of making statements or hurling accusations?
I think that it shows that Eliab knows his brother well.
Yeah, I think so. So
I know what you're thinking. I know what is behind those questions.
Yeah.
And I am mad already.
Yeah. Well, Dave, what do the rest of y'all think about that? Because I kind of like that. Yeah, it seems like CNN and Donald Trump going at it again, doesn't it?
I think one thing is he has said that Israel is under reproach,
Mm-hmm.
right? So somebody needs to take it away. So he's right in front of the soldiers saying, pretty much, you guys have brought shame on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I just think it's interesting comparing the press with the two presidents that we've had within recent memory. How they're handling these two different presidents that we have. And it's just, you can see it right here. This is a CNN question asked to President Trump right here, or a Fox News question asked to President Biden right there with King David. I just think it's interesting. David, in the story we saw that David showed a lot of responsibility, finding a keeper for the sheep, carrying the stuff, putting the stuff in the baggage train, running to see his brothers, not dawdling to get there. In spite of all of that, David got in trouble with his older brother. So today, does it still happen that when people do good things, they're still going to get in trouble? I mean, when they act responsibly, does it still lead them to get in trouble sometimes?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. What kind of things? Go ahead, Diane.
I don't know that this little brother is acting so responsibly when he asks his questions.
Well, all the other aspects of him were responsible, but these questions might have been a little irresponsible. I'll buy into that one. But was Eliab right in getting angry at David?
I think he's jealous that David know who God is. And, so he feels humiliated.
Eliab might feel responsible.
Yeah.
Okay.
The word David said make people feel humiliated. It looks like David know who God is and they didn't know.
Oh, that's interesting. All right, you guys, go ahead, Diane.
I think that Eliab is responsible for his younger brother.
Feels responsible for him.
He feels responsible. His brother has just been sent to bring the supplies. He knows that. I brought you he's come up and he said, I brought you this much bread and this much that, and I've already, got some cheeses for your commanders. We're all good. Dad says hi, Mom says hi. And that was his brother, I think, sees it as that's what you're to do. And now his brother is getting involved in this other stuff, and it's like, shut up before you make people mad or before you volunteer for something that you shouldn't.
Yeah, kind of like maybe there's some eyes shifting from David to Eliab. You're going to allow this to happen, kind of thing. Yeah, kind of interesting. All right, I'm going to need y'all's help here in forming an application question. So what part of this story really stood out to you guys? Is something that you want to talk about a little bit more? So I took a shot at one and it didn't work.
I love that in this story, God's going to use David's youthful enthusiasm.
Okay, yeah, we're going to see that. Now, in the story, we do see that David exhibits youthful enthusiasm with faith, and Eliab got upset at that. So does this still happen today, that when people are enthusiastic about God, that other people might get offended at that? Yeah, thank you for that, Diane. I appreciate it. Yeah, so what kind of things do people have faith about that other people might get upset about?
The gospel.
Well, the good news, that's right, salvation through faith.
I was joking, but yeah.
Well, the friend that I mentioned earlier went to Ukraine and carried supplies.
Right.
I think there could be a point where maybe some of his friends might have said, well, that's foolish.
That's dumb.
Right. You shouldn't go get, there are agencies to do that. You don't have to personally take things to your friends to encourage them. and support them, that's, you know, that's a little over, that's a little over the top. That's putting yourself out there against
Yeah,
the
but knowing
giant
Sam,
instead of
yeah.
waiting.
Yeah, knowing Sam, it's not over the top. So he probably would have wanted to go into Ukraine and deliver the things personally, I think. But
Yeah, I think you would. I'm just saying some of his
Yeah.
friends might have said,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, just even going
might
to
have tried to
Poland.
discourage him from doing that. I think it's
Yeah.
very Samish.
Yeah, it reminded me of a missionary, a young Asian guy, I think. He went to a tribal area and was killed just recently, right? A couple of years ago.
An island, wasn't it? Yeah, where they had never gotten anybody else before.
Yeah, and a lot of people just criticize it. So that
Right, he
was,
made it to the news and got criticized for
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Thank you for sharing that, Flora.
And I think, you know, we're all, you know, close to 30 or close to much larger numbers. And it is important to encourage youth
Mm.
that when young people want to do things, they have that enthusiasm and they have that faith, to give them some guidance, but not to just try and cut them off.
Mhm, mhm.
But
Well,
to maybe, yeah.
Let me share a story about that. That's a great, thank you. Can I just cut you off? Is that all right, Diane?
Yeah.
You're not going to get mad about that?
No.
Okay, so there was this missionary and he was trying to raise like $10,000 to go on this trip to wherever he was going to go. And he was about 60 years old. He was more or less my age. And he was stuck at about $3,000. He couldn't raise any more. And he was in a church sharing his vision. And a young man, and the pastor gave a young man an opportunity to come up and share about his mission vision. And he said he wanted to take some clothes down to the border in Mexico and distribute the clothes out. And the older guy was thinking to himself, what a total waste of time to do that. And so God impressed on his heart that any offering he got that day, he should give to the young missionary kid that's going to go do that wanted to take those clothes down to the border. And he was arguing with God for a while. Now, this was not me, okay? He was arguing with God about this. And so God just kept impressing on his heart to give that offering. And a big offering came in, over $1,000 for this guy. And, you know, maybe $50 for the kid. And so the missionary took that $1,000 offering, which would have been a big step forward for him, like 10% of his trip. And he donated it to the kid for his trip to the border to give out clothes. And the kid was just through the roof excited that he had this big offering to go. And now he could drive down there and have a full tank of gas each way and, you know, eat, you know, on the trip and give out the clothes. And after he did that, God provided the rest of the money right away for the other missionary to go. But what Diane said about encouraging young people, that's really important. That's a really important thing to do. And so I'm, you know, that's just a reminder of us all to encourage young people. So have there been any opportunities for encouraging young people? Luke, are you wanting to say something?
Oh no, I just really like that story you just said. Like, it just, you know, God always talks about his blessings and stuff. And I just think that guy was really, you know, of course, his faith, but I just think it was how God always says, you know, to deny yourself. You know, he denied what he wanted, and it who knows how much it actually, you know, it blessed that kid, and who knows, kid blessed many, and then it still came back to him.
Yeah,
That's just, I like that. And Diane's right, you know, it seems like, you know, just since I was a kid, seems like every 5 to 10 years, you know, society has rotted away in certain morals. I think the kids are more important. They've always been important, but just need to know God and the way society's going and the lawlessness. It's the youth are more important than ever at reaching right now.
Thank you, Luke. I appreciate that. And thank you, Diane, for mentioning about encouraging the young people. I appreciate that. Does anyone else want to share something? Go ahead.
So there's a website that I follow called Campus Reform. And it's a lot of conservative college students who find themselves on very liberal college campuses. And while you don't have to be a person of faith, a number of them are people of faith who find themselves not welcomed and their voice is not welcomed at the university. And so they go, and when they see things that they think need to be put in the spotlight, they write really pretty objective pieces. They have some op-eds, but they do good journalism, and while they're in school. And I think that that's great, that there are people that are supporting these people to report on things truthfully, without a lot of bias in the language. And a number of their stories get picked up by the national news. And sometimes I'll go down to that little contact the author, and I'll pick one. And if I've noticed that their byline is coming up a bit, and just say, good job, keep at that.
Oh, I like that. That's nice. That's probably a very encouraging thing. Do you use your name when you do that?
Yeah, I do. And it's a private, it's a message to them. It's not a posting of a thing. Though I do post on Facebook. Sometimes I'll post on some of their
do you think those students might remember who you were as a teacher?
Oh, no. No, I'm just saying, these are just, they're all across the country, and they report.
Oh, okay.
Often they report in their state, but they'll report on sometimes other states too, and they tell you what year they are. And I have a couple that I'm sort of fans of their. One guy, I'm like, oh, you're going to be graduating. I won't be hearing from you anymore. He'll graduate next year, I think. I think maybe this school year. But I think that's good. It's an organization looking to develop youth leadership and youth reporting.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I appreciate that. It turned out to be a fairly interesting story, didn't it? We even though we're a small number of people, had some good insights. This story is in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 20 to 27. So look it up. Look up the whole chapter. It's really an interesting story. It's where David fights Goliath. And okay, well, thank you all.